Hey, welcome. Today, we're thrilled to have Mike Belsito, the co-founder of Product Collective, joining us on the show. Mike's a true powerhouse in the product management world. He's known for building one of the largest and most influential communities out there for product professionals, and he's a driving force behind Industry, the product conference, where he's created a platform that brings together thousands of product managers from around the globe to Cleveland. But Mike's expertise doesn't stop there. He's a seasoned entrepreneur, author, and educator. And he's a co-host of a popular startup podcast called RocketShip.fm, which we'll get into. Mike, we're excited to dive into your insights on product management. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much, Chuck. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, absolutely. So let's start with Product Collective. What inspired you to co-found, and how has that community just evolved since you created it?
Yeah, well, I started Product Collective with a friend of mine, Paul McAvinci, and we were product people at that time, back in 2014, but very confused product people. I actually, I've spent my whole career in early stage technology companies as a early employee, executive, founder, but I found myself at this point in time where I was looking for my next adventure. A company that I had in the past was acquired, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. I remember getting recruited as a product manager. And I remember going to lunch with the person that was recruiting me for this specific role. It was with a ticketing technology company. They did the ticketing for pro sports teams and college sports teams. And I remember saying to her, look, this role sounds awesome. It was director of product strategy was the title. But I'm like, this sounds cool, but I don't know if I'd be great for it. Like, I never went to school for product management. And she goes, oh no, Mike, nobody went to school for product management. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. And right. So I took that role, but in my mind, I remember thinking, but what happens when they figure out I don't really know what I'm doing? And then, I started really learning about product on the fly, listening to podcasts and reading books and blogs and talking to other product people. And I think that's where I learned that so many product people feel like they don't really know what they're doing, but they're in the job, and maybe their companies think they're doing a great job, but still there wasn't this place to turn to feel like you're not alone. And so right at that point in time, I had spoken at an event here in Cleveland. It was just a kind of a broad tech event that my friend Paul put on. And afterwards, he had asked me for feedback as a friend and as a speaker. And I said, I thought it went great, but there are a lot of these broad tech events, even in Cleveland. You know what you should do? I'm trying to figure out what it means to be a product person. Maybe you could really focus on one aspect of tech, and maybe it's product. There's not a lot of things out there for people like me. And he said, well, you seem pretty passionate about this. What if we did it together? And so fall of 2015, we put on the very first edition of Industry, the product conference. And so really Product Collective as a community started as a conference, which is completely backwards from how most, conferences start. Usually it's like you start with a community, build it up, and once it's big enough, you say, oh, how can we monetize this? And, conferences might be one of the last things you do. We started as a conference, but back then, there weren't very many conferences for product managers and product leaders. And so we put on that first event, really just more as a passion project. We both had full-time roles at the time, but it struck a chord. We had, even with no marketing budget, no real, kind of not really knowing what we were doing, we had 250 people come in from 21 states and 7 countries that first year. And that's when, to us, we said, well, gosh, what could this have been if we were full-time into it? What could a path look like for us to go full-time into this? And it's 2 days of the year. What about the other 363 days? How else could we be helping product people? And that's where we started to develop other aspects of the community. At the time, that included building just a Slack community that's kind of transformed and turned into what we now run, our member hub. It turned into us launching our industry interview video chats, where we chat with product leaders from all around the world, me co-hosting RocketShip.fm, basically doing things year round for product people to help them feel like there is a resource to turn to. And that was back then. And over time, I would just say it's developed even more, where now fast forward to 2024, we have Industry. We also organize the New York Product Conference. We offer training through a collaboration with Gigantic, which is on-demand video-based training for product managers. So there's a lot of things we do now throughout the year, not just Industry, but Industry still continues to be a big part of our focus.
No, that's an incredible story. I want to ask something along the lines, not sure exactly how to ask it, but man, you had to figure out product management first. There wasn't a book for that. When you started all this and you said 2015, I mean, there's not a book you can buy or a course you can take on how to build a conference and the training curriculum to take a product person and turn them into a product leader or whatever they're aspiring to do. So my question is like, what kind of insights did you get uniquely from this experience of building a community and connecting product professionals together? I mean, what has this taught you that is just probably a completely different business skill?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and it's interesting just as things have sort of transformed, but I think there continues to be value in face-to-face interactions. And I mean that at various different levels, right? Like at the very simplest level, a product manager meeting up with another product manager for coffee in person, like at a coffee shop,
Mm-hmm.
at whatever it might be, at a restaurant for lunch. There's so much value in that. And not just product manager, person to person, right? We
Mm-hmm.
all live now in this sort of Zoom first world, and it's great, makes things very convenient. We can now connect with people all over the world. But what I've kind of come to learn over the years is when you get people together in person, great things happen. And that is, you could say that for attending a conference, but I think you could say that just for two people getting together person to person. It's one of the things that even though now, so especially post 2020, things are especially Zoom first, the value of those in-person interactions, it's really hard to replace. Like we still have a virtual conference. We had to start that out of necessity during the pandemic. We still have that. It serves a different need than the in-person conference,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't replace the in-person. There's no, like, it's apples to oranges, right? But
Yeah.
to me, I feel like just organizing industry and, just as a first time conference organizer, that's the biggest thing it taught me, is that value in the in-person interactions.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of how at industry at the conference you'll encourage those face to face interactions? I go to a conference, you sit in the back, and you meet some people here and there. But are you doing anything unique or special to help people have
We,
that human to
yeah,
human
we try to. We
connection?
definitely try to. You're right. I think a lot, especially within tech, many of us are not necessarily extroverts, right? Like we deal with people. We have to deal with people all day long with our roles as product managers and product leaders, but we might not necessarily be personally extroverted. So we recognize that, and we know that maybe even most of the value that people get out of conferences is the people that they meet, not necessarily what you hear from the speakers on stage. That's a part of it too. But let's face it, if it was only about that, we could just carve out a day at home and turn on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube, and we could pull up the best talks in the world right on YouTube. So it's the values in the connections that you end up making. And so just as an example with industry, one of the things we do is I personally reach out to attendees before the conference starts, and I send them a little survey. I say, hey, fill this out. Let me know what is of interest to you. What is your superpower? What is a superpower you wish you had? And if you fill this out, I will connect you to 2 to 3 other people before industry even starts. So let's say you know nobody, you're now going into industry with 2 to 3 new product friends that hopefully you could pick a date and meet at the conference. Like you're
Yeah.
going into it already knowing 2 to 3 people. And so many people take us up on that. And we spend a lot of time putting together because there's a lot that, if you might imagine, trying to
Mm-hmm.
make those connections, and AI
Yeah.
helps with a little bit of that, but we're trying to figure out not just randomly connecting people, but how can we connect people that are looking to connect with certain types of people with others that are looking for what they're looking for too. So it's fun for us to make those connections. It's funny, like sometimes, I mean, this is one of the things that gives me the most satisfaction when I hear an attendee say, oh yeah, that email you sent, actually we're connecting now next week for just to catch up, like
Mm-hmm.
after the conference.
Yeah.
And so they met at the conference, but now it's a relationship that they form. So that's
Yeah.
just one small example.
Oh, it's a huge example. I think if I go to a conference and if I can have one, two, three big takeaways
Yeah.
and make one, two, or three connections, real connections, someone that I will see again or talk to again, that's a successful conference. So
Yeah.
I applaud that effort. That's great. Um, so in what you created with the product collective, what you're doing with industry, even your courses with Gigantic, your podcasts, like what I sense is this theme of inspiring, educating, teaching product people how to do their jobs better, right? And that's obviously a passion. I'd like to dive into some of that. I think you actually when you're pinning, you've pinned a couple articles. You call it a deep dive,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of times when you hear someone talk or speak about something, it's not their primary message. It is the small example or some application that they specifically do. That's the takeaway. So that's why I kind of like to deep dive into a couple. So I did, I checked out what I think was the blog on Product Collective, and you've done some different deep dives lately. So let's dive into a few.
Sure.
So deep dive on positioning first. In something that you produced, you talked about Tesla's positioning, like how they intersected two different positions. Which for me, when I'm a marketing person, I always look for the vertical and the horizontal. Right? Like I'm looking like it's not enough just to position yourself in a vertical. I want you horizontally positioned as well. Like I want you as niched as possible. Now, as a product person, you're talking about positioning intersections, if I understand right. So talk us through this, what I think is a little bit more advanced positioning, because you're overlapping two different positions.
Yeah. No, and that's, look, first of all, I want to recommend to everybody, there's definitely people much smarter than me that talk about this all the time. Like April Dunford, she's the person that immediately comes to mind. She's just awesome. When it comes to positioning, she is the person I recommend that people talk to. Yeah. So
now, hold on one second. Say your name again and spell it.
Yes, April Dunford, APRIL DUNFORD. She's the author of a book called Obviously Awesome. And then I think the second book is called Sales Pitch. So two great books. She's spoken, actually she launched Sales Pitch at Industry last year.
Nice.
So I've learned a lot from her. But to your question, I mean, on positioning, the way I try to think about it, and again, explore what April teaches, but what I try to think about it is, we sometimes think about our products as, this is a product. How can I position it? But the reality is we're serving different groups. And sometimes those groups, if you think about it in the context of jobs to be done, they're hiring our products for different reasons. They're hiring our products to do different jobs. And that's the whole concept of jobs to be done. People don't buy a product because of the features and the functions. They're hiring our products to do a job, to solve a problem. The same way that, like, as a company, we might hire a business consultant to solve some sort of business problem that we have. That's what customers are doing for our products. But it's not, when we say, let's position our product, you're not positioning it to just one group. There's not this one group. There's not this one problem that our product is usually solving. Usually there's a handful. And maybe those are, you could think of it as in jobs, you could think of it as personas, but there are a handful of problems that our product tries to solve for. And so when I try to think of positioning, I try to think of each of those individual personas or each of those jobs, however you want to focus on it at your company. If we were just thinking about that as an individual person or individual job, how would we position it there? And then you could start to see patterns emerge. There might be certain problems we're trying to solve for, or certain jobs people are hiring our products for that are a little bit related. We then might be able to start to reposition, or so that's where the sort of the merging of some of the positioning happens if we see those overlaps. Those are some steps that I take when I think about positioning. It's kind of going backwards and thinking about what job is it that people are hiring our product for, or really at the core, just what's the problem people are solving for. But so some thoughts on that. But again, I recommend people go and explore everything April has to say. She's the expert.
That sounds great. So, when someone has that problem and they have a job to be done and they want to hire your product, they have to be able to find you. Mm-hmm. So I hear product managers and often struggle with their product category. Like what am I? And there's this balance between the blue ocean concept of let's pick a category that we can own, a new category. But then you have existing categories that people already know that, hey, this product might solve this problem. Like I need to be able to go and find it online, and I need to know what to search, even, or what is in the directory, which category, what do I go to? So could you, and again, I know there are people smarter than us that help figure this out, but your perception, and even point us in the direction of somebody too, is like, what's the importance of choosing the right product category or target for what you're building?
Yeah, I think it's dependent on the stage that you're at. So I'll even give you an example for us at Product Collective. With that first edition of Industry back in 2015, we were confused product managers, but in the beginning we said, well, what do people think of when they think of products? And actually at that time, like, we were thinking, well, yeah, like, okay, software product, that's one of them. That's what I'm familiar with. But there's also just physical products. Like, would people expect to come to Industry maybe to talk about physical products? Like, what about Internet of Things? That was kind of popular at the moment. So we the first edition of Industry, we had people from all different backgrounds beyond tech even speaking at the conference. So we took this very broad view of what product meant. And in our mind, we're like, well, look, even that person that's representing physical products, they might learn from the people on the digital product side and vice versa. So it's very broad. But what would happen is at Industry, where we really struck the chord was on software product side. So after the conference, we're going through the reviews, we're interviewing attendees where they got the most value. And the people on the physical product side, like, it was okay for them. But on the digital product side, it really struck a chord from learning from the other digital product people. And I think maybe it has to do with, in our case, the fact that, like, a brand manager has existed for decades, right? But a software product manager, it's still very nascent. There weren't as many places for people to turn to. So for us, at first, we positioned it more broadly, and it was almost like casting a wide net. But we saw those patterns, and then we got very narrow. We specified software product management very quickly after that. So I think, we're very early stage. I think companies at that early stage, you want to be specific about the problem you're trying to solve for, but you also have to be realistic that most successful companies, they end up being successful not necessarily with V1 of the product that they originally launch. Usually they've needed several iterations to solve the problem they were after, or they ended up solving a problem that they didn't even know existed for a different market. And in our case, it's not as if we didn't know the software product management market existed, but we didn't know that they were going to gravitate towards what we were doing quite as much. So I think it's important to have that broad approach, at least at first, but very quickly you have to sort of zoom in. And so you're getting your data points, and you have to have enough of those data points coming in so that you can actually make your decision on where to zoom in. That's how I've approached it in the past.
No, that's great. And this concept of zooming in, so you're broad early stage, and you said, okay, I'm gonna zoom in. Right. That you get the data points, you figured it out. You probably use data and a little intuition, like you figured it out. But a lot of times as a product manager, it's not about zooming in. It is truly a pivot.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate or have an example or a story of, like, a brand, or have you ever had to, or how would I think about just a complete pivot? Like, I'm changing product, I'm changing target audience. This is big.
Yeah.
But pivot's different than zooming in.
First, and there's multiple kinds of pivots. There's market pivots and there's product pivots, right? So, and there's probably several more to really mention, but those are the two that I like to think of sort of top of mind. The very first company I ever worked for, we went through several different pivots. This is a company that ultimately, in fact, 2 years ago, just got acquired by Spotify for $200 million plus. It's a company called Findaway. We were in the digital audiobook space. I was the first employee that was hired at Findaway back in 2005. It was just the founders and me. It was a completely different kind of company when I was with it versus what ended up getting sold to Spotify. But when I was there, the multiple pivots we went through and the success that we saw because of those pivots. Like that was my, I went to business school. That was my real business school. That was my startup business school. So as an example, we launched these products right out of the gate called Playaway. It was a preloaded digital audiobook. You could think of it looks like a shrunken down little book. It has the artwork and everything, but it has an audio jack, and you just plug in headphones and listen. Runs on a AAA battery. So we position that as the simplest way to listen to an audiobook. And the company was pretty dead set on this being a retail product. You'd buy it in a Barnes and Noble or Walmart or Target or whatever. And in fact, they got some retail contracts, and that gave them the confidence enough to start hiring their first couple of employees, me being one of the first employees there. And so once we had that, like my role was pretty broad at first. In fact, the company's called Findaway. On my business card, day one, they were sitting on my desk, and my title was just Findawayer. I was doing a little bit of everything. But a part of what I was asked to do was, hey, Mike, we've got retail pretty much covered. See if you could drum up business anywhere else. Like, go out and explore. See if this thing actually like can be helpful in other areas. And the funny thing about it is I ended up just stumbling on a market where our product solved a problem in a big way, bigger than any other market that we were serving, including retail. And that was with public libraries and schools. So like Playaway in a retail setting, it made sense, right? Like we had licensing relationships with publishers, and you could get the Da Vinci Code on Playaway. That was the popular book at the moment, right? So if you're buying it as a gift item or something like that, made sense. It's the same price as what you'd pay on CD, but this time it's all on one little device. And mind you, this is like downloads were out, but it's like takes 20 hours to download an audiobook. So different time than today. Streaming, not even a thing back then. But it was kind of just a nice to have. It was solving some problems, but it was really more of a nice to have at retail. I started visiting all these different other channels just to explore. Some of them where it made no sense, but some of them, public libraries as an example, they were almost dumbfounded. They're like, Mike, do you realize like this is a big problem for us, and you guys just solved it accidentally, by the way. It's not like we solved it because we had public libraries in mind, but in a public library, the audiobook was the number 2 most circulated item next to DVDs, not even books. It was DVDs at that time. But the thing is, if it's a 20-hour audiobook, that's 20 discs. And if one disc gets scratched, you have to take the whole thing out of circulation. Maybe you have a replacement, plan in place. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have to buy a whole nother audiobook. So for libraries, audiobooks were a pain until Playaway. You get it all on one. You're telling your patrons, hey, just use your own headphones. Some libraries included a battery, some didn't, but it ended up solving this big, big pain point for them. And so after a few months of successful pilot programs and seeing the struggle that we had in retail, we just pulled out of retail altogether and focused specifically on public libraries and schools. And it was to the point where, when I left that company in 2011, I joined it in 2005, it was a $20 million company. We were pretty much exclusively serving public libraries and schools at that time. We just stepped out of retail altogether. So the pivot, well, a lot of times we think of a pivot in how we have to change our product, and that makes sense. But also it's like being open-minded to, hey, did we accidentally solve a problem in another market that we're just not thinking about it? And that's why keeping that sort of broad view at first, knowing, you have to zoom in at some point, but keeping that broad view and looking at some of those tangential markets, I think is always really important.
No, it's a great story. Great story. So, let's jump over to another very important, I'm going to say even marketing, but product management question. Deep dive into pricing, because you're positioned, you're in the market, you've got your target audience. Pricing can get complicated. There's so many different ways to do things. For me, if I can actually, let's stay in software here, and even stay kind of in a SaaS world, because that's where it gets really interesting for me. There's a lot of different ways to price SaaS. It's usually per seat, but you can get into value based, and then you can get into usage and tracking and all this kind of stuff. Like for you, what are you seeing as it relates to pricing and all the different models that are out there, and how a product manager wraps their mind around this, because they participate in the conversation.
Yeah.
And have to then even kind of manage and understand how the pricing affects different features that are on or off and use. I'll just so man, where do you start when you think about pricing?
Yeah. I mean, I will say what's been interesting for me is seeing just how things evolve over time. And sometimes what was old is new again. Like just you mentioned pricing and software and different models, and it just brings to mind 37 Signals. Actually, we're releasing a podcast episode on rocketship.fm coming up soon with Jason Fried, the CEO at 37 Signals. And, they have SaaS products, Basecamp. It's sort of it's a kind of unique way that they model it, where it is SaaS, but you get to a certain price and that's the max you'll ever pay for your organization, unlimited number of seats. So they like to fly in the face of maybe conventional wisdom when it comes to pricing, but they just launched a whole new series of products and that they're going to continue to add to, called Once. It's in the Once family of products. Writebook is one of the products. And then one of their older products, Campfire, they've re-released under the Once brand. And what it is you pay one price and you own the software. They literally, now you have to host the software, and they make it as easy as possible for you to host it on your own. But they even give you access to the code that you can make changes if you want to, sort of make it your own flavor of Campfire. And some companies are starting to do that. So now, is that the right model? Jason Fried will tell you, I don't know. I don't know if that's the right model. We as a company saw an opportunity to try something different. And so I think that's one thing that I just encourage product managers and even entrepreneurs is to not assume that what everybody seems to be doing right now has to be the way that you have to approach it too. Now, Jason Fried and 37 Signals, they're in a different position where they have other successful products. If they kind of flub pricing on Campfire, they can live, they can go on. So you have to figure out what's the right thing for you. But sometimes it's just not so easy to figure out what the right thing for you actually is. So in the very beginning, I kind of like, and this is at the very, very early stages of a product. I like offering it to different customers with different, not just different prices, but different even models. And knowing that you're going to have to, you can't do that for a certain number of customers. But if you did just for a couple customers let's just say you're trying to identify 3 different routes to go, you might at least work with a customer to say, hey, we're in the early stages of this. We're going to give it to you for this model. It might change over time, but for right now, we're going to price it a lot less for you, but in this unique model. Maybe it's usage based, maybe it's value, but whatever model it actually is. I think you do need to try, if you never try different things, you're never going to know what the right model actually is for you. But it has to be profitable for you too. So that's why I think, it's sort of trying before you're just zooming in and saying, no, this is absolutely the price 100%. I think is important, but it's because if you just pick one and go with it and go all in on it and go for a very long time on that, and then realize that a different model was actually the right model, it could be too late.
You're right. I'm going to add another layer to this, but as I do, I'm going to give you a signal as to where we're going. I want to talk a little about usage based pricing, specifically as it relates to product features that involve AI, because what AI brings is a cost of usage. And whether you're trying to, let's assume that they're not bringing their own tokens or their own API key, because that creates resistance in the sales process, and it's not the way that I don't think that's the way to handle it. But you can. Maybe it works. You never know for yourself. But let's assume that there's this cost of tokens that you have to either cover, or maybe you're even creating more value by how you have built your prompts and your interfaces and what you're actually doing inside of your software. But most SaaS software that introduces AI has to at least recoup the cost of the tokens or have some type of protection in there. So if you've never done anything related to usage-based pricing, how does a product manager start to wrap their minds around this? And I mean, you've got the CFO that's wanting to pay a bill. You've got product guys wanting to build something really cool in AI. And then you're sitting here in the middle going, how do I monetize this?
Yeah.
So have you had any exposure or experience or conversations, or could you share some insights on usage based as it relates to, interacting with the cost of tokens?
Yeah, well, to me, this is where the value of community comes in, right? This is why industry exists. This is why Product Collective exists. Other communities, I'm sure, it's when you run into these issues where you feel like I've never been through this before. I don't have the personal experience to rely upon. You have somebody to call, to talk to, or shoot an email out to send a DM on Slack to ask their perspective of it, right? And so that when we try to have our own video chats, for the podcast, at industry, we're trying to gather people so they feel like they have a network of people that they could turn to when they're in this position. So number one, I would say, rely on your outside community, rely on the people that you've met over time. That we're not networking just for the sake of networking. And it's not just about networking, about finding that next job. It's for this. It's for when we run into an issue that we're just not sure how to approach. We have people that we could turn to try to get smarter at that. But I to your specific question, I'm seeing companies approach it in different ways. You have companies like Intercom that when they say usage based pricing, it's literally usage based pricing. It's hey, it's going to be a cost per resolution, and they define what they mean by resolution. Might not match with your as a customer, what your definition of a resolution might be, but that's how Intercom's approaching it. Mm-hmm. There's a company that actually we use called Opus. It's mm-hmm. AI basically for cutting videos up. So I could upload to YouTube or just share a link, and it'll help me cut that video up into individual smaller chunks that I might be able to share in short form. Now, the way that they approach it is it's still sort of a SaaS model. There is a monthly price that you pay up to a certain point, up to a certain number of credits that you're using. And in a way, that's kind of like, with ChatGPT, it's kind of how OpenAI approaches it. Like if you start to ask so many questions, it's going to say, hey, you kind of can't ask any questions for a little bit. So I think that even with usage-based pricing, there's different ways to think about it. But I would say before just jumping in and saying, hey, let's do what Intercom's doing, or let's do what Opus is doing, reach out to people from those companies or other companies where, you're like, gosh, I really respect what this company's doing. Product manager to product manager, this is your opportunity to sort of build your network. Even if you're not a part of a shared community with them, this is your opportunity to start to sort of build your own community.
I think in gigantic, let's before we move on to a topic that I want to make sure we cover about your career and leadership inside of an organization. Let's stick it with AI just for a second. I think in the gigantic platform, you actually have some AI courses specifically for product managers. What should, other than knowing how to prompt and, understanding how AI works, and, whether you're an AI enthusiast or, the world's going to end, wherever you fall in the thing, how should a product manager be thinking about AI right now? How do they make sure that they stay sharp? Because to me, it's very binary. You either are going to adopt AI in your personal and business, or you're not. Like so for me, and it's not there yet, but it'll eventually get there, I think. So how should a product manager be thinking about AI, getting exposure to it, learning about it? And what might be one example that you've heard of a product manager or leader doing something innovative with AI?
Yeah, well, I would say first things first is just start to speak or learn how to speak the language that people are speaking within AI. So let's just say that you're a product manager. You haven't had any exposure to AI. You hear everybody talking about it. You're using products. You're using ChatGPT, and you're having fun giving it prompts and help you do your job. But beyond that, for your own product, maybe you're not there quite yet. Well, you could start to dig in and just understand the language. And this is the same. I mean, I kind of give the same advice for product people that maybe don't have technical backgrounds. It's like, or people that are trying to break into product management. They're like, I don't have a technical background. Is that a bad thing? It's like, well, not necessarily, but you eventually, you're going to have to speak the language of the developers and the designers that you're working with. So when I say speak the language, I mean knowing like, what are the different flavors of AI? You know, that we are saying AI, but do we mean agentic AI? Do we mean, are there other types of AI that we're talking about? Different products are kind of, they're different forms and flavors of AI. What are the language models? When we're saying large language model, what does it really mean? Are there different models that people are using at one company versus another? So really just starting to dig in and understand. And that's the course that you're referencing through Gigantic. I mean, that's what we're trying to help product people learn, at least the basics, to start having conversations to make them feel like, okay, now I understand it to at least the level of knowing, is this something that we should start implementing in our company? And if so, what is the next step? We want people to feel more confident and more comfortable about that. But you don't have to do that just through our course. I mean, the good thing is these days, whether it's podcasts, whether it's video chats like this one, there is a wealth of information out there about AI and nearly any other topic. So I would just say, make a concerted effort every day. Maybe it's like, if that's your goal, to say, look, I'm going to be, by the end of summer, I'm going to be, well, maybe, gosh, summer's almost ending right now. By the end of the year, I will feel like I am 5 times more knowledgeable about AI. Make a smaller plan, a more bite-sized plan. Maybe that means like every week you're consuming an hour of content about AI. You're reading at least 3 articles about AI. So by the end of you're kind of working backwards. By the end of the year, you feel like you're in a much better place to make those decisions. The reality is, I mean, while I do think AI will probably touch almost all of our products in some way, I do think some companies maybe too fast went right in and said like, oh, we were a company that focused on X, but now we're an AI company that focused on X, right? Like, maybe that makes sense, but I feel like some people jumped in, they went AI first without really asking themselves, is there a problem that we're solving that AI is allowing us to solve in a much better way? So I think, I just think if people feel like they want to learn more, break it down into baby steps and just start to teach yourself by going out and finding content that is already out there. I mean, again, we have Gigantic as a training course, but the reality is there's a ton of great content out there.
Yeah. No, I learned the most about AI by just being in communities where we're talking about it. And I usually, I mean, I'm not a developer, but I can speak the language a little bit or enough to hang out in those groups. Yeah. And, it was about a month ago, someone started throwing around the term RAG. And I'm like, I had no idea what they're talking about. So I looked it up, figured out what it was. Now that it's, it's you augmenting and building your knowledge base and just understanding what that meant. Now I can follow along with folks better. Yeah. So I say that as an example of you have to understand the concepts and know how to do the language just so that you can interact with the developers, with the folks that are building these things. So I think that's a great approach. And yeah, you're funny. I mean, I saw the same thing in the marketing space. Everybody became a AI expert, and we're going to automate your marketing. And but what it really boils down to is, I'd ask the question: well, do you have a good marketing strategy to begin with? Because if you don't, you're just going to mess up faster.
Right.
So, right. But all right, let's jump over to soft skills for a little bit, because what I mean by soft skills are, if I want to read about positioning, I can buy a book. If I want to think about pricing, I can ask very, very specific questions. Trying to develop yourself as a leader in an organization, it's hard. I know there's books. I know I can read about leadership, but man, it means something different every day. So 2 things caught my attention in your blog. You talk about leading without authority. And I do know that, like you can be a chief marketing officer, a chief financial officer. It's not as common that it's a chief product officer. I mean, it exists. I know it does. But a lot of times a product leader is, you aren't given the same type of authority. You don't have the army underneath you. They work for other people in the organization. That's my interpretation. But talk about your concept that you touched upon around quiet influence, innovation sprints, wherever you want to go with it. But talk about this concept of how do you lead without the stick, without the authority?
Yeah. And this is what a product manager has to do every single day, because we're tasked with helping make sure that our company is launching game-changing products. These are the products that our companies are building their entire existence on. But even though we have that responsibility, those software developers that we're working with, those designers working with, they don't report to us as product managers. They report to a director of design, the CTO. None of those software designers and developers usually report to the product manager, yet the product manager is asked to lead those teams. So how do you do that? I think the big thing is people need to see that, they need to understand the why. This is one of the big things that I feel like sometimes gets lost within the product world is we get so focused on all right, let's get the roadmap in place. And now we got to make sure that we're spitting out these products at the times that we said we're going to spit them out, right? Like if this is the roadmap, we got to hit the roadmap. And so we're asking our teams, hey, this is it. We got to get this done. But did we explain why? Did we involve them in the process? Were those designers and developers a part of the, and I'm not saying it needs to be a democracy. We're not necessarily voting on, all right, who wants feature X? Raise your hand. It's not that, but it's involving those designers and developers in the process so that they feel like they were, and not just that they feel like it, but they were a part of the role in making those decisions. Even if ultimately you are the one that ends up choosing, all right, these are the products we're going to launch. Even when that's the case, though, you have to make sure that they understand the why. They're not machines unless you have, AI agents that are ones doing the software. But I would say, when it's people, anything that's involved with people, in order for them to feel motivated, they need to understand what it is that they're building towards. So to me, above everything else, that's kind of what it comes down to when we talk about influencing without authority. It's making sure we're involving everybody in that process, making sure that they all have a role in the process of building product, and that they feel like they are, that they understand what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. You have to make sure that they understand that context. That is maybe 80% of it right there. I mean, there's a lot of other things, making sure that you're showing how you personally care about what that person has to say, and you're proactively involving them in the process. You're proactively asking their opinions, and they have to feel like they're involved throughout that entire process. But that, when I think of influencing without authority, that's what really comes to mind.
No, that's great. Let's touch on one more kind of softer thing, and this is in the spirit of your career. You described, I think, the transition from being a good product manager to being a product leader as a fork in the road. What does that mean? What is that fork? What happens as you go from a product manager to being a product leader?
The biggest thing is deciding whether or not you care more deeply about the product or the people that build that product. Some people make the mistake of thinking that to progress in your career, all right, I'm an associate product manager, then product manager, then director of product, then VP of product, chief product officer. That can be a path, but that transition of going from, say, product manager to director of product, usually what happens is now you are managing people. You do have more authority in that case. Product managers are reporting to you. Once product managers are reporting to you, your product is the people, not the individual software product. So if that is something that's interesting to you, if you like the idea of developing people, if you feel like you're well suited for that, transitioning to product leadership might be the right path for you. But some people think that's the only path. You can absolutely progress in your career by being focused on the product too. There's lead product manager roles. There's other product roles where you are a senior person. You are seen as a senior person. You're respected as such, but your focus is on the product, not necessarily on managing people. So at some point in your career, you have to make the decision. Am I going to go all in on people or all in on product?
No, that's great. And, and honestly, I've seen people, or even for myself, it may not be the best path that you want to manage people. That's why I think it is a fork in the road that, when you start managing people that manage product, that's a different job every day than showing up and just building out the product.
Yep.
So, hey, Mike, this has been great. Thank you for first joining us and two, sharing all these insights. Are there any final thoughts or anything that you want to leave us with? Tell us about the conference, anything you want to do?
Well, hey, first of all, I appreciate you having me on. This is a lot of fun for me. No, I would say if you're liking what you're hearing and you want to explore some of the other things that we have going on, definitely check things out at productcollective.com. Our community is free to join. You just sign up at productcollective.com and you start getting our content, invitation to video chats, things like that. And yeah, if you want to surround yourself with the best product managers and product leaders face to face, come to Industry, the product conference. It's this September 23rd to the 25th. The main conference is 2 days, but some people come for a bonus day of workshops as well. You could learn more at industryconference.com. It should be a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks so much, Chuck. I appreciate it.